Okay, colleagues, can I welcome everybody to this Cabinet meeting at just after 6:30. And I think I'm actually going to take it at the start. So for anybody that hasn't heard, very sadly, former councillor and former mayor of this borough, Brenda Kirby, passed away yesterday afternoon. I know that many of you who knew her knew what a fantastic contribution she made to civic life in Croydon over many years, how fantastically she represented her community and worked with politicians across the political parties and none in Croydon on many, many issues. So we will have more opportunity at next week's council meeting to say a little more, but can I suggest we stand for a moment's silence for Brenda? Okay, thank you. Okay, into the formal agenda. Part A minutes of the Cabinet meeting, are they agreed? Thank you. Apologies for absence. Jim?
Leader, I've received an apology for absence from Councillor Viddy-Mine.
Thank you very much. Disclosure as interest, I'll assume they are as referencing this.
Leader, apologies also from Councillor Cummings.
Apologies. Did we get that, Jim? And disclosures of interest, I'll assume they are as written unless anyone's going to add anything. Urgent business, have not been any brought to attention. Exempt items, can we agree the A and B split? And then that moves us straight on to agenda item 6, which is to welcome our still relatively new Borough Commander, Andy Tarrant, to the Cabinet meeting tonight, and I think perhaps with no further words from me, Andy, I'll invite you to say a few words about your observations, still relatively new to Croydon, and the challenges and the successes that we hope lie ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Andy Tarrant. I'm the new Police Commander for Croydon Borough. Fantastic opportunity. I'm really looking forward to working on the borough. I do know the area. I was brought up not too far away, and I do still have family that live in Croydon. So for me, this isn't just about a professional appointment. It's also I've got some personal pride in being on the borough as well. I take no or make no apology for the brief presentation that I'm going to do, which is actually centred around confidence and confidence in policing. Because I think there is actually a good news story when you look at the tackling of crime in the borough. So I've circulated to Cabinet members the latest performance of Croydon Police in terms of tackling crime. And if I may paraphrase Gordon Gekko in the film Wall Street, who said greed is good, actually when you look at our scorecard, you will see green is good. So in terms of performance in relation to the crimes that matter to most people, so housebreaking, theft of or from motor vehicle and muggings, those crimes are significantly down in the borough, and I think that is a good news story for Croydon and where it used to be. But for me, I think the key challenge of my appointment is really around translating that, if you like, into confidence, so people feeling more safe in the borough, and also being able to deal with their concerns. So, as I say, I make no apology for the fact that I'm going to major, while I'm at Croydon, all about confidence, and confidence in policing in particular. So the issue is, why is it important? Well, I think confidence in policing underpins a primary tenet of policing, as in why the Metropolitan Police was set up, which is about policing by consent. So that is policing for the public and with the public. And I think by encouraging confidence, that supports that primary aim. I think it underpins a multitude of other activities, whether that be recruitment or representation of the wider force. So I think if there's more confidence in communities, they're more likely to join the Met. And I think wider confidence will spread to partners, so that could be the people we work with as well. So I think that's why, for me, confidence is really important. But I don't want to neglect some of the key drivers of what actually makes people feel more confident. So, for example, fair treatment has been identified as a confidence driver, and I'm very keen to do things that look at fair treatment across the borough. So that could be looking at stop and search or the impact of particular police tactics. And I've got a meeting set up later this month which will specifically talk about stop and search. I think this is a really good news story, and I think the sort of way that crime has been tackled on the borough naturally links into potentially the further development. And I noted with interest on the agenda that the sort of future development of Croydon is part of this agenda item and part of the presentation. So I think this is a real opportunity to look forward and not back, and I would hope that people feeling safer in this community will actually support the regeneration efforts of the borough. And I think that feel-good factor amongst constituents and communities is really, really important, because when I speak to most people, or most boroughs I've worked on, crime is people's #1 concern. So I want Croydon Police to be more effective in terms of tackling crime. I want to bring back that feel-good factor, and I want people to feel safer, because I think ultimately what they could do is then promote Croydon and act as advocates in their various different communities in terms of promoting that feeling safer message. So I really welcome my appointment here. Thank you very much for the welcome I've received over the last few weeks, and I really look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark, can I invite you to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo some of the things that the Borough Commander has talked about. From our position, the things that we were mostly concerned with are anti-social behaviour, low-level crime, domestic abuse and confidence in the police. And I think with the confidence in the police, I think we're starting a whole programme of work to try and counter some of that. And that includes the stop and search meeting with Nero from the BME Forum. We're looking at meetings, community meetings across the borough. We're doing a walkabout along London Road to meet some of the shopkeepers along the London Road area, to meet shopkeepers and get their view of what the issues of crime is in the borough. So there's a lot of work the Borough Commander will doing that to restore some of the confidence in police. And I think that the satisfaction levels in the police are quite high, but I think there's still some issues to do around the whole confidence area, and I think that's the bit we want to tackle most. On domestic abuse, the figures there are still quite high. We have set up a strategic board to look at those figures, and one of the things we want to look at is whether an increase in those figures, what does that actually mean? Does that mean more people are confident in reporting domestic abuse? Is that are there more incidents of domestic abuse? Are they repeat victims of domestic abuse within those figures? So that piece of work is also doing, and the Borough Commander sits on that strategic board as well. We're involving both the Health and all the council officers as well to look at those figures and try to understand what the impact of domestic abuse is, because that is a clear part of our remit to try and bring those figures down. But other than that, no, I think we're off to a good start, and it is that restoring the confidence in the police, getting out to the community, less meetings in the town hall here, and actually getting out, going to the mosques, going along, meeting shopkeepers, meeting the public out on the streets, and I think that's a very important part of the policing programme that we have got set out.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, I would just add to that. It's why this new administration has absolutely targeted the street scene, the sort of fly tipping that we saw, and rubbish. Still a huge challenge. But that is about restoring pride to the area, making people feel safer in an area, and restoring that respect to an area. And I think we should congratulate all the police officers who are working so hard locally to change this around. But there are still challenges in terms of there are pockets of burglary in certain areas I'm aware of, and in terms of responses to that the public want to see in terms of how they're communicated with, and as you said, the domestic violence agenda, in terms of the challenges that are there. And I think we do need a greater understanding in terms of what you've said, in terms of the levels of reporting, and trying to balance that off between giving people the confidence to come forward on what is the changes or otherwise that we're seeing in that area. So I very much welcome what you said. Also welcome the stuff on stop and search, which I know is hugely contentious in this borough. From a meeting a debate that took place in only last year in this very chamber, with many people from the community in the chamber. A lot of concern over that. So if we can make some progress there, I think that will be a strong message for people. But I think, as administration, we will have absolutely no complacency in this area, and I'm glad to hear that the police won't be either. But progress to note. Steve.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. Yes, very much welcome Andy to his role, and we all look forward to working with him to make Croydon a safer place. There is a good news story in that total crime is dropping in this borough, though there's an exception around violence with injury, which is an issue across London, and we'll be speaking about that. I'm glad he's identified the issue of confidence. Certainly some of the drivers of confidence are things like fair treatment, but it's also around engagement, visibility and availability. And one of the challenges we've got to go back on is to make sure that the officers are seen out there in the wards. I also was in London Road last week speaking to shopkeepers who are unhappy, to be frank, at the service they were getting, and there are examples in all our wards going far south as All Saints and Sarnissa, which has some problems. So I think we've got a good news story here. Though on confidence, we're about the 5th lowest in London, which is not good. We need to work on that, and I'm really pleased that Andy's come in, recognise that, going to grip that. I'll be happy to work with Mark and others to improve on that. So welcome to the borough, Andy, but good news story, but we have much to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking around. No? OK. Well, Andy, thank you very much indeed. You're very welcome to stay for the meeting. I'd strongly recommend the next item, but do understand if you have other commitments that may take you elsewhere at some point. Thank you, colleagues. If we could note the paper there and move on to the hugely important growth and plan and the district centre plan for Croydon, very much setting out some huge ambitions for this borough in terms of economic regeneration and physical regeneration in the months and years to come. And I think we're going to have a presentation. So over to Councillor Alison Butler.
Thank you. Earlier this year we did come to Cabinet talking about the Croydon Promise Growth for All, the presentation that was coming forward, which I hope will be coming forward at any minute. But anyway, this is about how we actually want to deliver growth for our borough. And this is growth right across the board. That's growth in new homes, growth in jobs, growth in new office space, but also looking at our district centres and the wider space so that everybody in Croydon can benefit from what is coming forward. Lovely. Okay, if we could move on. Thank you. Brilliant. And so this is about our vision for the future by 2020, about how Croydon's economy will be growing rapidly, new homes will be coming to the borough at a faster rate, but also our district and local centres will become neighbourhoods of choice, because after all, those are the places where people actually live in the borough, and they'll become places where we'll improve the jobs offer, we'll improve the housing offer, but also the cultural offer. And the Metropolitan Centre will offer the most exciting shopping and leisure experience in London and the South East. If we move on, Croydon will confirm its position as South London's primary commercial centre, and will ensure that by making sure that new offices, but also other employment opportunities, come to people in Croydon. It will be a place that's easier to move around, where it's more welcome for people who are on foot or on cycle, and will also be a hub for learning. We really will be a city in all but name. So the growth plan is the Croydon Promise. It's our commitment to residents, investors, developers and businesses, and most of all to the people that live here, about what the council can and will do to deliver growth. The Council will lead from the front in making growth happen, and on this slide we look at the 10 most important things that we need to do. So it's about housing starts, it's about homes for people from Croydon to live in that are affordable. It's about new jobs, and that's jobs right across the board, not only from the excellent Westfield development, which is obviously important to the town, but other sorts of employment opportunities and apprenticeships and better opportunities at school to learn different trades and go on to university. It's about attracting investment to the town. It's about new business starts, encouraging people from Croydon to develop their businesses, but also encouraging businesses into the town. It's about high quality office space, so that we've already heard that the government wants to relocate departments here, but to encourage other industries to come in and improve our job offer. It's about getting international calibre universities, and we know there's a number of universities that are interested in setting up in Croydon. Transport networks are going to be absolutely essential to get around our town, and also to visit the places in the borough, and also to give people the opportunity for these employment opportunities. Our trams, our buses, our trains all need to be of the top offer. And supporting residents into employment. We've got a great plan in place already around pathways to employment, but we want to see many more apprenticeships and many more opportunities, particularly for our young people, but then for people of all ages. And the whole thing is around Croydon, buy local. Let's keep it in Croydon. Let's encourage our businesses. Let's encourage our people. And when we've got money to spend, let's ensure that goes on Croydon businesses and Croydon services. So the promise outlines growth and potential that comes right across the borough. So these are just some of the examples. But if you look, we're looking at all places of the borough. We're looking at New Addington and Fieldway and what can be done there to regenerate. We're looking at the east, the north, the central and the south of Croydon, because all our neighbourhoods are equally important. And so one of the things this report does is identify strategic sites to release our ambition of actually improving opportunity across the borough. And what we have expressed right throughout the report is that local districts and high streets are equally important as any development in our town centre. And the developments of these neighbourhoods will be done in conjunction with the community. So we'll be going out to speak to people, to speak to residents in local areas, and making sure that their needs and their aspirations are taken into account. And we hope from this that many of our districts will become more exciting and more vibrant. And of course the clean and green Croydon is essential in delivering that, the don't mess with Croydon message. So where there is major development proposed for the Metropolitan Centre, we want to ensure that the benefits are reaped by all our people, that those opportunities spread right across the borough, and also encourage some of that big business to actually regenerate and be working in our district centres. The promise also outlines our response to investment programmes, setting out where and when and by what means the Council will invest through its revolving investment fund. So what we must ensure that many of the things that are happening in Croydon actually get off the ground, and the Council's ready to lead on that. And that's issues like encouraging Tech City, making space available. It's encouraging the extension of our tram network and ensuring that that capacity is extended. It's looking at West Croydon Station and East Croydon Station and improvements around there. And it's looking at the actual office space and broadband facilities, ensuring that when new businesses come to our town, we have the infrastructure to support that. The Revolving Investment Fund will ensure access to funds to unlock key opportunities and deliver managed and sustained growth. And you'll see from this chart that we've got here what it's about. It's about revolving those funds. It's about bringing in resources from a number of different places and using them to actually encourage investment and growth in our town. And then from what we get from that investment and growth, we'll be using that funding again. So it's about how Croydon can benefit from investment, but not only one time, how we can actually use the growth in our town to encourage further investment. And what has been essential is our programme delivery dashboard, which is about ensuring that all this investment in our town actually goes ahead. And there's a number of people actually working on this, so at one time we'll know what's happening with all our developments, so we know what needs a push. We know that if there's major infrastructure work to be done, that we know who's building and where that building's going on, so that the town doesn't grind to a halt. What we've done is made sure that everything keeps moving during this period of investment. So to sum it up, our promise to the people of Croydon is about transforming our ambition into delivery. Thank you. We're very lucky this evening that we've actually got two people who are wholly involved, I think, in supporting Croydon. So if I can ask first if Steve Newman from Westfield would like to.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. We've been strongly behind Jo and her team since Jo turned up. It feels like a long time ago, but actually it's only a few months, and they've done an amazing job to pull this piece of work together, and we must congratulate her and her team for that. I think it's a strong piece of work, and what it really does is focus attention on the need for delivery, and I think that the phrase that you ended up there with was very strong. It is about delivery. I think it's also very important, one of the messages, key messages that we've said from the outset when we first came to Planning Committee, which was employment. We think there's a massive opportunity to create employment here across the borough and for that to be local, and we really want to work with the different agencies within Croydon to make sure that happens, and that's already, the discussions are already ongoing. We do support also the opportunity for world-class universities, and we've also had conversations with those to confirm to them that we've got the confidence that things are going to happen as well. So I think that's very important. I think where we're very keen to make sure, from our point of view, that we have good cross-party support for our project, and we would like to see that the same for this growth plan, and ensure that we can really push forward with Croydon, not just for the next 5 years, but beyond that. We are long-term investors with our partners, and we want to see that growth in Croydon continue for many years. I would say this is the start of a journey. This piece of work which has been done really does highlight what is broken in the town and needs fixing, and it is not a smaller amount of funding which was required. So we would say this is the start of a journey, but one which needs to be dealt with. It also touches on some of the points, and it's good to hear Andy here this evening, some of the elements that we've been saying for a long time, which is safety and security, but maybe some of the softer side of communications and the issue of image and perception. We need to make sure that this isn't just about dealing with hard facts, it's also dealing with the slightly softer side, which we can help with. And I suppose I'd end on saying that our support is mainly built on the confidence for investment, but more importantly on, as you ended, on delivery. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those comments, and I think the reputational piece in terms of the town, which is going in the right direction, the confidence, the need to reassert strongly our sort of culture in the widest sense of that and build on that cultural offer is fundamental to this. In terms of those longer and wider ambitions as well, I think we made it very clear indeed, hopefully across the chamber, that we in Croydon would want to see, in terms of looking to the longer term, the opportunities it would bring, the much talked about second runway to be at Gatwick. So I'm delighted to welcome Alister Mcdermott, the Chief Executive Director. Welcome here, and a few words from yourself, and if you could update us, you probably can't, can you, on the progress of the Gatwick offer, but lots of politicians I spoke to in Manchester last week were hugely supportive, but obviously Heathrow are equally running a very strong campaign.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm really here tonight to express our wholehearted support for Croydon's growth plan. We think it's very well thought out, and we think it's one that we as a business can get fully behind. And why is that? I think there are 2 points I'd like to try and draw out. The first is that, in our view, the growth of and the success of Croydon is essential to the future economic prosperity of London. And we all rely on a successful London to provide the employment and the other things that people need to be able to have a good life and to enjoy air travel. Second reason is that we believe that Croydon, in association with Gatwick Airport, can really make a difference, not just to London's future economic prosperity, but for the whole of the South East, and especially that bit of the South East that connects London down to the South Coast, where we are obviously most geographically concentrated. And these are essentially the reasons why we're in the process of working with Jo and her team and Nathan and his team from the London Borough to develop a memorandum of understanding that will allow us to define precisely how we are going to work together with the London Borough to deliver, make our contribution towards delivering this growth plan, which is for mutual benefit. And from a Gatwick perspective, some of the benefits that we hope to derive from it are we have quite a number of employees already who come from the Croydon area, but we want to obtain more from this part of the country. We want to see successful businesses located in Croydon growing, which can provide the goods and services that we and the other companies at Gatwick Airport are looking to procure. And we also want to see a very vibrant local economy where there's mutual support. We can provide the range and frequency of air services that people in Croydon want, either for holidays or the businesses that rely on in order to conduct their business. So this is about mutual benefit, which I think is a solid foundation for that memorandum of understanding. On the second runway issue, it's very nice to see that more and more people are coming round to our way of thinking. More on that in just a minute. But at the heart of that, the heart of the second runway debate, the points we are making to the Airports Commission and will be making to the government in due course are largely a reflection of the points that I've already been touching on. First point to make is that we believe our second runway solution at Gatwick is one that goes with the grain of the way in which the aviation industry in the UK and internationally is evolving. Many people are surprised to hear that 65% of demand for air travel today and in the future is for short-haul European and domestic services. Not surprisingly, those are the countries that we trade with now and expect to be trading with mostly in the future. We're an airport that today accommodates a full range of different airline types, network carriers like British Airways, charter carriers, and the emerging low-cost carriers who are now the biggest carriers in the UK. EasyJet is the biggest carrier in the UK, bigger than British Airways. And if you ask Caroline McCall, the Chief Exec of EasyJet, who she's competing with, she'll tell you she's competing with British Airways, not Ryanair. So we have a solution that goes with the grain of the way in which the aviation industry is evolving. And hubbing, transfer passengers today account for about 14%. We think that's going to fall to below 10% for ways in which the international aviation industry is developing. The second reason that we make to the Airports Commission and to the government is because there are huge economic benefits to be derived from a second runway. And most importantly, we believe that those benefits are better derived in South London and down to the South Coast rather than overheating West London and over-concentrating development there. Third point we make is that we can deliver a second runway at a fraction of the environmental effects of a third runway at Heathrow, but a 20th of the noise of Heathrow, a 40th by some measures of the noise of Heathrow. And that's not to diminish or to dismiss the importance of the environmental effects that we do have, which is why we've already made a range of pledges to minimise, mitigate and compensate people for those residual effects that we will have. And the fourth point that we make to the Airports Commission, to the government, is that we can deliver those benefits up to 5 years earlier than Heathrow at a fraction of the capital cost. and we can improve by providing more competition. We can improve the quality of service that people can look forward to enjoying. And these views, just to finish on the note about, these are not just views that we hold. In a recent poll that we've conducted and that we're now advertising in the media, around Heathrow, it may not be surprising to hear that 51% of the people around Heathrow are in favour of a second runway at Gatwick over a third runway at Heathrow, compared to 40% who prefer Heathrow. Perhaps slightly more surprisingly, 46% of London residents prefer a Gatwick solution to a Heathrow solution, compared to 35% who prefer Heathrow. But perhaps most surprisingly, around Gatwick, 52% of local residents support a second runway at Gatwick, compared to 36% favouring a third runway at Heathrow. So we think there is a strong momentum building behind our second runway case. So just to conclude by repeating what I said at the start, we're here to express our full support for the Croydon growth plan, and we think with a second runway we can do much more still. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those contributions. And can I bring in Councillor Tony Letts?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much indeed for our visitors' presentations. With regard to Gatwick and the second runway, I attended the Coastal Capital Board meeting last week where we spent a great deal of time talking about this. And one thing that really grabbed me was the fact that the representative from Gatwick said, not Gatwick Airport, but from the town of Gatwick, said there's almost zero unemployment there. Well, we've lost 11,000 jobs since 2007, so we'd be very, very happy to take up some of your 20,000 jobs that are around. But can I just say, with regard to the paper, that it's an incredible piece of work. It is actually the gateway to our future. It's real. People have been so involved in putting this paper together. My area of responsibility is jobs in district centres and entrepreneurs and getting people into work. We are also delighted we can see some movement too on, we are, I think, the 7th largest tech hub in London. And the realisation that we are going to have that hub for new entrepreneurs, new businesses setting up. So it is very, very exciting. And maybe some of them will be able to have jobs at Gatwick and elsewhere when we take up, or even with the police, or no doubt with Westfield. But I just want to congratulate the leader and the deputy leader and Joe and everyone else who's been involved in drawing together this paper. It's come together as a team effort, and it's incredible. And you'll know if it's worked in 5 years' time. You can, if we're still here, you can challenge us. We will be still here. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments. And I think this really is the sort of practical tools that deliver on that vision. It's quite clear from the numerous events and conferences I've spoken at in the last 2 or 3 months that there is a wave of confidence now flowing into Croydon, and this paper is about how we turn that confidence into a reality in terms of new homes. We are talking to all sorts of other partners as well in terms of infrastructure and the need to make sure that with this new development we get sustainable and sustained infrastructure growth. So whether that's partners at the GLA, in government, or perhaps an alternative government, it's vital that we have a mutual understanding and support around the Westfield project, Gatwick and others, that the way we can really sustain this growth over many years to come is to make sure that we are delivering not just the projects on the ground but the infrastructure support to make that very practical indeed in terms of accessing these huge opportunities that we see. It was actually our late colleague Malcolm Wicks MP always used to say to me the best form of benefit was a job. Well, this is about delivering 20 or 30,000 jobs potentially, and if we got decent conditions in place and a London living wage, then this is a real exciting opportunity to make sure the people of Croydon benefit from this investment. Do we have any questions on the paper itself? Tim? And can I congratulate Councillor Pollard? Are you officially in post yet? Okay, well, congratulations and good luck.
Thank you for that. fascinating to listen to your comments, Councillor Letz's comments, and to be given the impression that this entire paper has been developed from a standing start in a mere 3 months, which of course would be a remarkable achievement if it had any basis in truth whatsoever. But of course what this paper actually is a continuation of a strategy that the Council has been on for a great many years. It's a successful strategy. Even your delivery milestones that you put up on the chart earlier were in fact all committed to and started on the ground under the previous administration. So clearly this side warmly welcomes the paper and will continue to provide all the support that we can for its delivery. I think there are a few important questions to ask, though. One of those relates to the position of attracting a university. I'd be interested to know what progress you've managed to make on that since the previous administration handed over the reins back in May. And I think we'd also like to ask some detailed questions on the revolving fund, because that is an area which has been built on the foundations that the previous administration left. And the paper is quite light on detail, and clearly you will want to come back on that, I'm sure. But one of the questions I would ask the Cabinet member, in terms of the split between the private and public funding that you're anticipating on this, Leeds Council uses a 3-to-1 private to public fund ratio. What kind of fund ratio do you anticipate for Croydon? I think also in paragraph 3.3, we would like to know what the phrase "the council's investment will be a significant proportion of a significant element of the council's assets." What exactly do you mean by a significant element of the council's assets? And finally, in 3.3.8, you include a delegation of powers for investment. And I have to say that does worry me, because prior to the election, what was then the opposition made a lot of fuss about how it was going to introduce a greater degree of transparency and openness in Croydon. And yet what you're asking Cabinet to sign up to appears to be delegation of decisions of enormous magnitude to 1 or 2 people to take behind closed doors with absolutely no accountability whatsoever. So I think we need some considerable reassurance that there is actually going to be some openness and transparency on this, because if not, you are guilty of precisely the crime that you used to accuse us of, unjustly in that case.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. I'll take that as a sort of a loose endorsement, as I think is your style that we're picking up. I mean, the serious point behind what you said, some of this work was clearly going on. But if you look at what the crucial bit I think we're putting around this is actually direct engagement with the Leppin Coast to Capital that clearly had been somewhat lacking if uncharitable. A commitment to 30% affordable housing that didn't exist at all because yours was at 10%. The London living wage to secure those jobs with decent terms and conditions and clear opposition to things like zero contracts. And fundamentally, as we were saying a minute ago, the whole don't mess with Croydon, pride in Croydon piece to make sure that the council was stepping up and doing its bit in terms of making sure the borough was in as good a state as it possibly can be, notwithstanding the budget challenges we're under. So yes, some of the framework was in place, but this is now turning this very much into a delivery in terms of both the people and not just saying however much the confidence is there from the market that we'll leave it to the market in terms of what happens. We're very much working in partnership with those in the market, with those providing the housing and the jobs, to make sure that these are quality sustainable developments and quality sustainable jobs, as I said, with the London living wage and with cleaner streets as a backdrop, and with a provision of housing as part of the scheme that ensures local people have an opportunity to benefit from the scheme. There was a couple of technical questions in there in the ratio to public to private funding. I'll ask Jonah Greeny to give us a view on. But I should say, in terms of who we're working with this, as I said earlier, this straddles both the public sector, clearly the voluntary sector in Croydon, but huge significant investment from the private sector. And I do think the difference in, as I said, at risk of repeating myself, from this administration is a huge, much greater emphasis in working in partnership with the private sector to deliver the aspirations that were in the manifesto that we stood on in the elections. Joe, do you want to?
What I can say at this point is that we are talking to a number of people, both in the private and public sector. As the leader said, we've had good engagement with the Coast to Capital to look at how they can be an investment partner. I mean, this revolving investment fund is about a different type of mechanism for the public sector. That's the first thing. So going to partners like Coast Capital and saying, instead of us bidding effectively for funding for different projects, your fund can actually match other public sector funds to actually increase the opportunity for us to invest in things that will deliver regeneration outcomes we want, but also any return on that investment would be delivered through those developments will also benefit the fund in that it will be constantly revolving with any gained receipts from any kind of development that we do. The other thing that's happened over the last 6 months, I think, which is really interesting just in my short time here, has been the number of private sector investors who are now interested in Croydon. When I first came, there were a lot of house builders, as there still are, interested in doing business with the council. But even over the time that I've been here, there's been a significant increase in the number of, for instance, large pension funds who are interested in actually investing in the town. The key role for the council is about unlocking the sites, which is why the strategic sites work as part of this growth plan is so essential. It's how do we use a fund that's funded by the council with other public partners in collaboration with private sector investors to effectively unlock sites that will enable the town and the district centres to grow. So the answer to your question, sorry, briefly, what's the ratio? We're not working to a set ratio on this. What we're doing is ensuring that we harness all the capacity from the public sector and actually proactively working with private sector investors and funds to capitalise on that interest to ensure that we have this fund that can continue to deliver regeneration outcomes and a return to all the partners involved.
Thank you very much. I've seen Councillor Shafi Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I think this report is very important and very timely, as so many reasons have been given. But there are a couple of issues I would like to touch on, especially one, our proximity to Gatwick Airport. And it's not only for sharing those 22,000 jobs will be created and some Croydon people will get those jobs. It's not that interest only. There are hundreds of millions of people are passing through Gatwick, which is just a stone's throw away from Croydon. And we can actually attract those people to come here to have quality time and also spend some money here so that Croydon can get benefit. I think we should look that very proactively. And also I would like to welcome this report because district centres have been neglected for long, and we would like to preserve the unique, authentic identity of every local centre. Obviously, I'll speak about Norbury, that's my word, but we used to have a cinema in Norbury, and we have lost it. Why not we bring small cinema hall where people can, I'm just giving an example of Norbury. It could be true for Parley, Coulsdon, New Eddington, or Thornton. Any district centre, we should encourage those things to bring back so local people can go there, a small cinema hall where they can enjoy maybe some classic films and things like that we should encourage. And last point, I have seen in the report there are some mention of land banking, but I think we should be more proactive to see where the disused land, where people are holding this to get big bucks, and we can probably, I think Joe did mention about that, but I think we need to see that very actively so we can use those land to build houses because we are facing acute home crisis for local people. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Shafi Khan. And a cinema for Norbury, Councillor Godfrey will be working on it in the morning, I would hope. Councillor Pollard, you wish to come back?
Well, it's just that I asked 4 questions and I only got an answer to one of them, so I'd quite like an answer to the other 3, if that's all right.
Well,
and just to remind
you will get an answer, but if they were detailed questions you asked, we'll get back to you.
No, they weren't detailed. They were, how are you doing with the university? Where's the openness and transparency on the investment decision-making? And what do you mean by a significant proportion of the council's assets going into this? 3 political questions that I would have thought you or the Deputy Leader would be able to answer.
Well, we're doing very well with the universities. We're talking to a number of universities about coming to Croydon, and that's part of the confidence, I think, that we're seeing in the town. So I'll answer that one head on. In terms of the amount of the council assets, you've heard what's said there. We'll be prudent with the council's assets, and I don't think we'll be taking any lessons from the opposition as they are now in terms of use of the council's assets after the expense we saw to create the new office in Croydon. Precisely part of what we're doing is making sure that we get better value out of all the developments in Croydon that the council own, and clearly looking at the council's assets to maximise the opportunity they offer to generate both investment in terms of the budget of the council itself, but potential other growth opportunities in terms of health and education. Councillor Stuart Collins.
Thank you, Leader. I think there is clearly a difference in approach and in this paper than has previously been done, and I believe that's about teamwork and listening. And I give London Road as a really good example of this. And I'd like to put on record my thanks to Councillor Butler, Councillor Letts, and particularly to Jonah Greenie and Nick Watson for actually listening when we talked about the importance of building up confidence of the traders in London Road and of the residents in London Road. And it's brilliant to see the people here tonight speaking. I know Steve Newman and I discussed when we were in the London Road Festival about that confidence that's needed right at the gateway of the district centre on a really big development there. And it's brilliant that the police are also here to listen to us, talk to us about that, about how important it is to make sure that area is safe. And one of the things that was really great about doing this and doing it so quickly was we've actually got action underway. We are actually developing those shop fronts now along London Road. We've actually had a visit and talked to the traders about safety issues, and they can be confident, listening to us now, that we are serious about taking on board their concerns, because if we had have gone along the way we were and we didn't listen to those concerns, we'd have had a fantastic shopping centre where then you would have walked out of that shopping centre and there would have been a whole area where people had no confidence to walk down that road when it hadn't been developed and it hadn't been looked after. So a big thank you to the officers that have really made this report a different one. And I'd say that the great thing about this is that it doesn't look just at the town centre, it looks across the district centres all across the borough, and I think that is a brilliant development and a new step forward, and long may we continue involving people from outside like Gatwick, the police, obviously Hammersmith and Westfield in their people, because they've got an interest in making this work just as much as we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And in terms of cross-party support, I think that is there. It's slightly slow in forthcoming, perhaps locally tonight, but there's huge support as well, I should say, from the GLA and the Mayor of London for our aspirations, and I happen to know there is clearly for any future mayors of London, and we've had some very positive meetings with the deputy mayors as well up at City Hall, because to deliver this and the level of infrastructure, it's absolutely vital that we're working in partnership with those. I've also had very positive meetings, and I know they've got their own issues around Gatwick down there, but with the leader of Crawley Council. I won't say too much about that publicly, but I think there's a growing groundswell of opinion in terms of making Gatwick work for the entire, as you say, Croydon and the South East, and Croydon's growth plan and Croydon's position at the heart of the economy in South London and the wider South East, I think, is what we have the responsibility to deliver. Are we happy to agree
Stuart very kindly thanked many of us, but can I just include in that Lisa McCann, who has worked incredibly hard on this and has real ownership of it. And the most important thing is she has the trust from the community, from the businesses, and indeed from us as elected members.
Is she here? Well done.
Don't embarrass
It would be wrong to single anyone out, but well done, Lisa. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the contribution from our guests. Not wholly unrelated, can we now move on to agenda item 8, which is the housing company, which is going to be one of our options for tackling the shortage of homes in Croydon, one of a number of options, and I know this has been part of that wider regeneration ambition as well. Councillor Alison Butler.
Thank you, Leader. An option for tackling the shortage of homes in Croydon, and this really leads on from the previous paper about our ambitions and the growth of the town, and our ambition to deliver homes for the people of Croydon. And this paper gives us an opportunity to explore all avenues and work with a number of partners to ensure that the council is a main driver of regeneration, but to make absolutely sure that we do have homes, and all of us, all the councillors here have the many stories, and it's from the people being evicted from their private rented accommodation, from the young people unable to leave their parents' homes because they cannot afford a mortgage or a rent, and there's so many stories in this borough, and what this plan brings forward is a way of ensuring that we do have homes for the people of Croydon right across the borough. Simon, if you...
Thank you. Just to emphasise that, clearly we have as a council a lot of assets, and a lot of assets that could be unlocked to enable housing development, the needs of residents of Croydon to be met. The housing company enables us to use those assets, to use sources of funding, to work to develop sites, very often mixed development sites, which will both provide the essential housing that Croydon residents need, but also actually provide over a period of time a financial return. So it's really a win-win in terms of quality of life for residents and financially for the council to unlock assets, to unlock potentials, to make some of the schemes that a lot of people have desires for a reality, including regenerating some of our estates and making the improvements that are so critical to residents' lives.
Thank you, Simon. I know this is a massive challenge, a huge agenda. I did have a number of meetings with Emma Reynolds, the Shadow Housing Minister, in Manchester last week, and she's very much supportive of this method of delivery and many others in terms of helping us unlock the housing crisis that we are facing, and this is absolutely crucial as we seek to maximise the investment opportunities. So thank you for those words. Any comments or questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. On this side, yes, we recognise the need to obviously to secure more homes in the borough. I'm sure Councillor Mead has also stated, obviously as outlined in 310, the amount of social housing that's been built under the Conservative administration. I think it's nice to have that in the papers as a thank you to us. One important factor is obviously the private rented sector, and indeed, if you'd have been at the National Landlord Association meeting, Alison, last week, you'd have had the feelings of the landlords there. This is in relation and correlation to obviously this paper, so it's an important aspect.
It's a tenuous link, but I'll let you keep digging.
Thank you very much. I mean, may I ask Alison why she didn't attend, and also any of her cabinet colleagues didn't attend, as this is a very important meeting, recognising obviously the landlord stealth tax which you're imposing on landlords of Croydon.
We're straying off script now, Michael. But I think we'll end the latest party political broadcast for Mr. Barwell there. But of course, if you and Gavin are very much the landlord spokespeople in this chamber, and that's something I guess goes back to the sort of roots of the Conservative Party, perhaps. I do hope those Conservative members who might be voting on this issue in the chamber in the future will be declaring whether they do rent out properties for profit or not. Councillor Butler.
I haven't finished a couple of questions.
No, you made a rather serious accusation.
Okay.
So I'm just getting a response.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Well, contrary to what was implied at that meeting last week, both by politicians from your side and by the NALA, the Council did respond and have in fact provided the evidence since, and not only did we respond for our reasons for not attending the meeting, that was acknowledged by the NLA. So how they managed to stand up and say that we hadn't responded, given that they'd actually come back to us and said they were disappointed we weren't attending, but accepted our reasons why. And there were a number of reasons why, but one is, as you know, that we're in a consultation period over this, and we felt that it wasn't proper at that time, but we very much welcomed the NLA's response. And also at the time I was giving out community awards to members of our community who had achieved fantastic things, and we were honouring them for the evening. But going on to this, the licensing scheme is all about protecting tenants in this borough. It's about ensuring people have decent homes to live in. And what we've said constantly on this side is, yes, we're absolutely committed to delivering homes in this borough, but we're not committed to delivering them at any cost. And we will not allow the people of this borough to live in poor, substandard accommodation, and we will do whatever we can to ensure that they live in proper, suitable accommodation that's fit for purpose.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'll let you reflect whether you've got any further questions on this actual paper, and while you do that, I'll bring in Councillor Stephen Mann.
Thank you, Tony. I'm delighted to hear this proposal before us today. As a young person, many of my peers I know are struggling to get on the housing ladder in London and in Croydon as well. You know, we've got a lot of great things going on in Croydon, but we need to recognise that young people are the future of our town here. And, you know, things like London Infrastructure Plan 2050 sees Croydon as very much a heart for both jobs and for housing. And I look forward to being able to go away, tell this to my peers, and hopefully we'll see some success from this soon. Finally, a question: when do we think we might see the first homes from this?
Alister.
I think the paper at the moment is talking about actually going away and setting up the company, so we'll be able to come back to Cabinet with our final plans on this and further information for you.
Thank you very much. Are we back on the paper? Excellent.
Thank you. Okay. This is a question about the right to buy, and obviously having read the paper, but Alison, don't you acknowledge that the new tenants under the scheme who will not have the right to buy and will not be able to take up, obviously, offers in the future to get onto the housing ladder, is there anything you can do in terms of trying to change that, first of all? And don't you think you're not... These tenants want aspiration, they want to aspire to get into the housing ladder. Don't you think you're stopping them doing this? And the second point is probably a bit of a technical question, but as Councillor Mead outlined, there is set up a company called the Croydon Homes Limited. Why didn't you adapt or amend the Croydon Homes Limited and to save the, obviously, start-up costs, which are approximate 225k, and the cost implications? And since pre-May, you always sort of said to us about the way we were borrowing money. Isn't this more borrowing on top of more borrowing with tremendous financial risks?
I'll answer the first part of your question. And there are no, as you know, Councillor Neil, yourself, you've been in the housing for a long time, there are no easy answers, but what we are faced with in Croydon is an absolute crisis. We've got too many people on our waiting list, too many people stuck in substandard accommodation, and too many people are overcrowded. So in the first instance, we do need to address that, and this is very much what this paper is about. But what this paper does give is opportunities for mixed communities, so there won't only be excuse me there won't only be homes that come under this scheme. It will be about actually private development as well, homes to buy, and also homes that are mixed rent and buy. Simon.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of the other questions in terms of Croydon Homes, as the paper says, we're going to look at all the different options. The concern about Croydon Homes is in terms of the ability to have mixed tenure developments, which certainly is currently structured, Croydon Homes wouldn't, and also because we do believe that by putting the right assets in and having the right mixed tenure development, that this can generate significant proceeds for the council, and if it's through Croydon Homes, those couldn't actually be passed back to the council for the benefit of residents as a whole, which is why we're looking at this. But that's part of the options that we're looking at, over the next couple of months or so. In terms of the borrowings point, as with a lot of things, in the same way that we said that things like the borrowing that was taken out for the HRA and so on was entirely appropriate and supported that initiative, the borrowings that will be incurred here will be for mixed developments, and we believe that by structuring the right sorts of projects and the right sort of mixture of tenures, actually the risk to Croydon taxpayers is very low. There's never no risk, but low, and that what it will be doing is improving the lives of people of Croydon by unlocking the potential of many sites, and above all providing affordable housing of all sorts of different types of tenure, as well as meeting overall housing need.
Thank you, Simon. I would suggest there's probably no securer investment probably on the planet at the moment than investment into bricks and mortar in London. It really is about as guaranteed as I think anything can be in terms of what's happening there. That's why pension funds and others are looking at investment as well as the public sector. It would be go number 3, Michael, but in the spirit of the evening.
Thank you. It's just obviously on the technical question of why couldn't you use Croydon Homes Limited. I appreciate the factor of mixed tenure, but in terms of start-up costs, surely amending Croydon Homes Limited and registering them would be far cheaper than setting up a whole new company.
Yeah, there's a number of reasons, not least it wasn't registered with the Homes and Communities Agency, but there are others as well. There's some technical reasons. So, look, I think Dudley probably went down that route out of the best of intentions, but this is actually making it sort of fit for purpose where we are now in policy terms and cracking on with it. OK, thank you very much. Can we agree the paper? OK. Transport and highways projects, so some good news in here, even in tough financial times. Councillor Cathy B.
Thank you, Leader. This paper sets out our spending plans around the LIP for the next financial year. LIP stands for Local Implementation Plan, and it relates to funding that we receive from TfL for delivery of the Mayor's Transport Vision. It's year 2 of a 3-year plan that's already been submitted, and there are some significant changes here in order for us to deliver our manifesto commitment to deliver 20-mile-an-hour speed limits where residents want them. So we have reprofiled the spending to accommodate £300,000 for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits for the next financial year, and we have delivered that through reprofiling a little bit of the South Norwood public realm. The total funding will be the same, and it will be over the same period of time, but we've also delayed the Norbury public realm funding, partly not also to release funding for this, but also because there are some more technical difficulties around delivering the public realm in Norbury, because it's a TfL road, and there's been quite a lot of learning done in terms of London Road and particularly Southend in terms of the complexities. So that's the paper in short, and I'll take questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Cathy. Councillor Sarah Bashwood, and congratulations as well.
Thank you very much. My question relates to the 20-mile-an-hour zone funding. At the scrutiny meeting, you stated that the borough would be split into 5 zones, and you gave us a very nice map. You also said that you would undertake consultation and implementation on each zone on an annual basis, although you did say you would go away and look at that. You also stated that for each zone it would cost about £300,000, meaning the whole project would cost £1.5 million. Can you please explain why you're only requesting a single zone money when you know this is a 5-year programme? And can you tell me what will happen if you only get part funding, and how that will affect your plans, as it could leave Croydon as a patchwork of confusion on the roads? In addition, can you also please outline what consultation will look like? So I was very pleased to hear you just say that you'll deliver where residents want it, and how residential roads and areas will be differentiated. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The reason why there's only 1 year's funding in here is because this only relates to 1 year. So we will be looking at how we can accommodate that within the LIP, but obviously next year we will be bringing forward the next year's programmes, and then there's a further programme of that. So, it's a manifesto commitment, and we will be supporting that through LIP funding, and we are currently estimating 300,000 a year. In terms of consultation and where people, doing this where people want it, we will do consultation on area. The scrutiny was a pre-decision scrutiny, so at that stage we were very much at the point of drawing up our proposals. The intention of the scrutiny was to get, feedback about how that was looking, and I was very clear that whilst we're pretty confident that in the very densely populated areas there is very strong support for this. Our Addiscombe councillors did some surveying there. We've done some in South Norwood. There was some in Norbury. We've had very, very strong support, and I do get a constant stream of requests from both residents and councillors indicating areas where people want this. So the expectation is that very much in the north of the borough there is very strong support for this. As I said at the scrutiny meeting, we acknowledge that the south of the borough so far has not indicated strong support for it. So we will be finalising, the proposals as we go forward to look at, the differences between the areas, and it will be about consultation. So, as I said at the meeting, if there isn't an appetite in the south of the borough, it won't be happening there. And we will, part of the meeting it would have been useful to have maybe a bit more information about some of the challenges that people think there might be in the south of the borough compared with the north, because the north is quite different to the south. So we recognise that many of the places that have already implemented this are more similar to the north of the borough. So it's a lot of dense housing without breaks of green park. So very happy for people who've got thoughts about this to let us know about their concerns. But as I said, it is about where residents want it, and if we have a consultation and it is very clear that there isn't an appetite for it, then it wouldn't go ahead. But I would want to consult the residents of Croydon rather than either you or I deciding for them what it is that they want.
Yeah, briefly.
Just come back briefly. Obviously, this is a 5-year plan that you've set out, and you don't have a 5-year mandate, and there's also not 5 years funding. So can you answer the part I asked about patchwork confusion within Croydon? Because it does concern me that if certain areas are 20, certain aren't, how can you enforce that? And also, how do residents actually know where they are and what they're doing in terms of the speed they can drive?
On the 5-year mandate from me, I don't think that's ever, politicians and authorities have always set out that. Boris has just set out his 2050 plan for London. I don't think anyone, even he's suggesting he's got a 35-year mandate. So, Cathy.
The areas that were drawn up, and it is still draft, were based on principal roads, because those would be the edge of fairly substantial areas that make relatively natural divisions of the borough. So you would have and the idea is to have large areas, not individual streets, not little groups of streets, but substantial areas. So it's very clear when you enter a 20-mile-an-hour zone and a speed limit zone. Better make sure I get my terminology right. So there are three of them were in the north down to and the more densely populated areas of the south, and we will clearly get through those in 3 years. It is within our gift to decide how we allocate the LIP in accordance with the Mayor's transport strategy, and we are committed to doing this. So, as I said, because this paper only relates to 1 year, we've only been able to indicate what we will do for 1 year. But we are committed over the next period to continue to support the 20-mile-an-hour zones. As I said, we initially think that it will be 300,000 a year. So we are committed to that. If we do it in significant areas, obviously, we intend to be re-elected and then to complete the job, subject to, the wishes of the residents. And the areas are sufficiently large that if for any reason the programme stopped, there would still be a large because, obviously where the boroughs have done it, there's a boundary for the borough and there's a boundary for where you enter a 20-mile-an-hour zone. So I don't envisage, given the size of the areas we're currently proposing, there will be any issue of confusion because of the boundaries that we're using of the principal roads.
Thank you very much indeed, Cathy. I've seen Councillor Pat Ryan, Councillor Steve O'Connell, Councillor Chris Wright. Then we'll review where we are.
Thank you, Chair. Would the Councillor B agree that the north of the borough, in particularly the highways, two comes to mind immediately, Waddington Way and Beulah Hill, but there were a stack of other roads as well, which desperately needed resurfacing. And would she agree that Councillor Thomas totally ignored, despite bragging and boasting about the number of money he received from national government and the Mayor of London, he rarely spent any of that money in the north of the borough.
Yeah.
Could I get a little hope from the new cabinet member that those roads will be addressed and the north will be addressed sooner rather than later?
Cathy.
Slightly off-piste there, Pat. We're talking about the lip. We will be looking at delivering resurfacing wherever we can to keep our roads up to scratch, but we have also got to engage in campaigns to ensure that actually the councils get more funding, particularly from fuel tax, to ensure that we can do a proper job, because actually there is a problem for councils across the country in terms of financing our road surfacing. So we will be prioritising those roads that need it most, regardless of where they are. I would say this is an administration for the whole of the borough, and it will be those roads that need it most that should get it most.
Not to say there won't be some in Upper Norwood. Councillor Chris Wright.
Thank you much. Could I refer to the bridge assessments in Appendix 3? Referring to Wood Place Lane Bridge, I was under the impression that it was going to be on the lip for the next financial year. It is no longer here. And could I remind Councillor B that only a week ago traffic had to be stopped crossing that bridge because it was in a dire state of repair. And could I ask her to reconsider this assessment so that Wood Place Lane Bridge, which in fact crosses the Brighton line and is therefore vitally important to the benefits of Croydon, could she reassess the Wood Place Lane Bridge and put it back on the list? Thank you.
I'm going to hand this over to Joe Negrini.
I'm sorry, could you give me the name of the bridge that you were mentioning again?
Wood Place Lane Bridge. It is the furthest south in the borough. Thank you. Perhaps you could answer my email if you can't answer the moment.
Chris, if we can come back to you on that, I think probably with some details, yeah? Okay, Councillor Steve O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Leader. I mean, as GLA member, I'm always very keen that we bid and get very large slugs of money from the Mayor, so you clearly have my support in principle. But I'd like to speak to Cathy particularly about Norbury and South Norwood. I mean, clearly her passion shines through regarding the 20%, 20 mile an hour project. But I have made a very strong point in lobbying the previous administration, which I was part of, to get investment in Norbury. And I'm very disappointed that you seem to have pushed back, or indeed perhaps even sacrificed Norbury on the altar of Cathy's crusade for 20 mile an hour. I'm very disappointed that Norbury's been pushed back. What does that tell the residents of Norbury? Shafi was here earlier supporting his residents. I think he's gone, and perhaps he would also share my disappointment. We had earmarked 1.1 million for Norbury and to start work on it straight away. To use TfL roads as an excuse, well, of course, we delivered in Coulsdon, we're delivering now in South Croydon, they're TfL roads, so I'm not so sure that's a good reason. And lastly, on South Norwood, we had earmarked 1.5 million for South Norwood. You're just going about 800,000. I'd like some clarification around that.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, I wish your passion for South Norwood and Norbury had been quite as evident when you were in administration, but Councillor Cathy B.
Firstly, I just want to confirm that the total for South Norwood is 1.5 million over the same time frame. So we've just rejigged the figures between years 2 and year 3. So there is no difference in terms of the total investment there. And it would have been nice to do everything all at once, but we have got a manifesto commitment for the 20 mile an hour. There is no reduction in our commitment in terms of investment in Norbury, but we are delaying it by a year. And I don't know if Joan really wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'd also like to come back to the previous question, if that's okay. But in terms of, looking back at what was put into the LIP for South Norwood and for Norbury, those two areas are still getting the money. There is, as you know, Councillor O'Connell, incredible difficulties and a lot of permissions that need to be given to actually do TLRN roads. And we found that on Southend particularly, and we're going to find that at Norbury. So in our view, we're quite happy that we've got a bit of breathing space to get all the necessary permissions in place from TfL and buses, and to ensure that by the time we do go on site for those works, that we'll be in a position where we've got everything in place and the whole kind of development and construction period runs very smoothly. But I mean, just to reiterate Councillor B's point, the allocations that were put in the original LIP program are still going to be delivered in those areas. The issue is, if you look at both of those, South Norwood and in terms of Norbury, we've delayed Norbury by 1 year, but we are still working on the figures at the moment and finalising those figures with a view to see how we can actually bring forward all the mobilisation, all the pre-construction, all the site surveys into that year. And South Norwood will be delivered to time over that period, but all we're doing is we're varying some of the money from 15-16 into 16-17. That's the only difference for South Norwood. Essentially, there's no change there at all. In terms of the bridges, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch your question, which was part of the problem in terms of you got a blank response from me. But in terms of the bridges, all of the bridges across the borough have, are based in terms of what we bring forward into the program, all have effectively stock condition surveys done to see what kind of condition they're in. These ones are the priority bridges because these are the bridges that need to be brought forward quickest.
Leader, if I... sorry.
Briefly.
Yeah, Leader, if I may, all I would just say is that if the boot was on the other foot and it was a Conservative administration bumping the residents of Norbury back a year for one of our pet projects, I would hear now the howls of anguish of Norbury councillors and others. I'll just leave that there.
Thank you, Steve, for the constructive remark. Cathy.
Actually, it may well be Norbury residents that are benefiting from the 20 mile an hour, because we do have a lot of requests from residents in Norbury for 20 mile an hour speed limits. So, swings and roundabouts.
Well, in terms of those priorities, I mean, I'm delighted to also say that myself and Cathy were in a very positive meeting with the Deputy Mayor for London, Isabel Dedrum, when we have agreed a significant piece of work in terms of the GLA, the officers at the GLA, with the Deputy Mayor around some extra resource on top of this in terms of really prioritising now safety in terms of pedestrians, motorcycles and cyclists within the borough. So we've agreed to work in partnership with her to really seek to make Croydon a flagship in terms of increased safety for some of the more vulnerable people out there on the streets in terms of transport. So this is a good news story tonight, and I think there's more to follow as well. Can we agree the paper? Thank you very much indeed. If we can move now on to paper 10, and we don't often say this, but I genuinely think this is a piece of a bit like the growth plan earlier, groundbreaking piece of work, utterly transformational, placing Croydon at the very centre of policy. It's certainly the direction of policy that I know if there's a change of government next year, they will be utterly committed to in terms of how we bring the local authority and the NHS much closer together in working in partnership. So I do want to thank the politicians involved in this, but perhaps more importantly Hannah, Brenda, Paula and Charlotte and other officers who've worked very hard on this indeed. As I said, this is going to place Croydon at the cutting edge of policy delivery. Louisa.
Thank you, Leader. There is a presentation which is coming up, I hope. I'd just like to say I'm very pleased that the Council, we are working with Croydon Clinical Commissioning Group to improve the health and social care outcomes for over 65s through outcome-based commissioning. And if you were to ask why Are we doing this? What's the case for change? There are increasing challenges on the health and social care system. Croydon has both a growing and ageing population, and there are increasing numbers of people who are living with long-term conditions. And of course, there is potential to improve performance in health and social care for people over 65. So I'm pleased that the Council and the CCG, as we both face significant financial challenges, we have to look at doing things differently in Croydon. And we'll be doing things differently in Croydon to meet challenges and create services that will be and are more joined up, services that incentivise improved outcomes and user and patient experiences, services that are focused on outcomes and not just on activity, services that put the users and patients at the centre of their care, and services that use health and social care resources more effectively. We have spoken to several groups of over 65s in Croydon, and this is what they've told us. They've told us that they want to be able to stay healthy and active for as long as possible. They've told us that they want to access the best quality care available in order to live as they choose and as an independent a life as possible, to be supported as individuals with services specific to them, to be supported to manage their long-term condition and experience improved, controlled and reduced complications, to be supported by a member of the health and social care team who has the training and specialist knowledge to understand how their health and social care needs affect them. So, how will the people of Croydon benefit? They will benefit from having increased focus on whole-person care that aligns incentives in order to deliver the outcomes that matter to patients and service users and the public, that rewards outcomes and not just activity, that puts outcome-based commissioning, puts resources in the right place in the system to maximise value. And from enabling us to collaborate and integrate, we'll have improved patient and server user experience through joined-up health and social care. Providers will be supported and incentivised to collaborate in order to deliver whole-person care. And this will deliver improved models of care. And we will be able to realise efficiencies in the system. We will be promoting investment in prevention, quality improvements and working practices. We will be able to reduce duplication across the system. There will be opportunities to deliver care in lower cost settings. And the evidence, both internationally and in the UK, suggests that we will have efficiencies of 10 to 15% possible. And if we could now watch an example of Sam's story as to how it will work.
Meaning many more of us with multiple long-term health conditions. Our current health and social care system won't cope. Fundamentally, it's the same system as when the NHS was set up, designed to treat episodes of illness one at a time. Already, we're failing to give vulnerable people the care they need, and we're set to run out of money fast. Meet Sam. He's 87 and suffers from emphysema, a disease that makes it hard to breathe, and also has type 2 diabetes and arthritis. Sam was coping pretty well until his wife passed away, but is now lonely and increasingly depressed. Sam frequently visits his GP, but finds it difficult to discuss all his needs in a brief consultation. If Sam can't get hold of his GP in a crisis, he calls for an ambulance. Each time, Sam spends time in A&E, and is often transferred to a ward as well. He sees lots of different healthcare professionals, and has to explain his conditions repeatedly. Frustrating. And Sam often has to wait to be assessed by social services before he can go home. The result? A lot of unnecessary time in hospital. And when he gets home, A lack of coordination between his GP and social care often means he doesn't get the support he needs. Eventually, after several hospital visits in just 6 months, it's decided to admit Sam to a care home. But what if Sam's health and social care services were more joined up? Let's imagine one of Sam's carers is given overall responsibility for coordinating his care. For example, Kathy, a district nurse. Kathy meets with Sam, his GP and his social worker. Sam explains that he wants to manage his conditions at home, and together they design a care plan which they can all access online anytime. Sam now gets more visits from Kathy at home, which helps him manage his emphysema and diabetes. On the occasions when he does have a crisis, Sam calls Kathy rather than an ambulance, so goes to hospital less frequently. And even when he is admitted, he's discharged after a quick review of his care plan rather than having to be reassessed. In this scenario, Sam's health and social care is funded from a joint budget, so the team can make smart decisions about how it's spent and call on the help of other social services. For example, as his condition deteriorates, the team decide to fit a seat in Sam's shower, provide him with an oxygen cylinder to ease his breathing, as well as a medication dispenser with a voice prompt to remind him to take his pills. Kathy talks to Sam about his loneliness, and he agrees to weekly trips to the shops with a volunteer from a local befriending charity. So now, Sam doesn't have to be admitted to a care home, instead getting the help he needs in his home. He feels happier, is healthier, and better use has been made of resources within the system. Let's recap on what transformed Sam's care. Put simply, local leaders in the NHS, social services and the voluntary sector created a shared vision of what good, integrated care looked like, centred around the needs of people like Sam and their carers. They pooled resources across health and social care, built multi-professional teams and created systems to allow Sam's information to be easily shared. Sound idealistic? Well, this is actually already happening in a few places. Now it's time to make sure it happens everywhere. Let's reimagine how we provide care. Get inspired at kingsfund.org.uk/joinedupcare.
Right, thank you. Right, hopefully we will all get there. We've gone through phases 1 and 2, and now we're at phase 3. And following on from tonight's meeting and the meeting that they will have at the CCG, we'll have to resolve issues around joint commissioning, governance, and of course detailed dialogues with providers. But as the leader said in his introduction, this is definitely the way forward. We cannot afford not to do this. And I'd just like to end by saying to welcome Dr. Tony Brzezinski, I hope I got the name right, and Paula Swan from the CCG. I'm very pleased to have them here tonight. And I don't know whether, Doctor, you'd like to add, or Paula, you'd like to add anything to the presentation. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a few words. For those that don't know me, my name is Paula Swan, and I'm the Chief Officer of Croydon Clinical Commissioning Group. I'll then transfer to Tony Brzezinski, Dr. Tony Brzezinski, who's the clinical chair of the CCG and, of course, a GP in Croydon. So just really to emphasise some of what you've heard already tonight. The CCG really does believe that this is the only way to address our health and social care needs in Croydon. We need to fundamentally change the way that services are commissioned and delivered for the people of Croydon. So we want to improve the lives and health through proactive care, and I think you've got that message from that short video. So we want to encourage health and independence and well-being. And currently, as you've seen, the systems don't currently deliver that. So they're not sufficiently joined up. We've been working very hard with the local authority over the last year, well, certainly over the last 18 months since the CCG was formed, to promote integrated care. And everything that we've been doing is the foundations of delivering this model, but it's simply not enough without focusing on the incentives within the system. So we don't currently focus enough on the patient or the user or their families. We focus very much on reacting to ill health.
as opposed to proactively focusing on well health and supporting and managing people to be healthy. So I can't deny this is, what you've seen tonight is quite a simple video, but it's actually a very ambitious plan for both the CCG and the local authority. And just to put this in context for you, the stakes are very high. This would result, if we proceed after stage 3, with a 10-year contract worth in the region of £17 billion over that period of time. With a collaborative of commissioners and a collaborative of providers. And it will profoundly change the way that health and social care is delivered for the people of Croydon. And this is a very difficult and uncertain journey, but then the rewards could be very high for us. So we do need to work very hard over the next few months to determine how this new way of commissioning and delivery will meet both the expectations, challenges and requirements of both our organisations, as well, of course, most importantly, delivering on the needs of the people of Croydon. So I'll just pass you over to Tony, who'll talk to you a little bit about the changing health needs.
So, for those that don't know me, I've been a GP in Croydon now for 31 years, and it's quite apparent that over those 31 years the health needs of our population have changed tremendously. But the health needs of going forward over the next 5 or 10 years will eclipse those of the last 30 years in totality. We have a rapidly ageing population, and as we age, we develop, as we've already been told, multiple conditions. But we're also developing conditions at a younger age at a far greater rate than ever before. 4 years ago, we estimated we'd have 16,000 diabetics in Croydon today, but today we have 19,000, and that figure's rising exponentially. And on the back of that, other conditions and complications arise. So the way we deliver healthcare needs radical change. However, healthcare is just part of the equation, as I'm sure you would agree. Health and social care support each other, and without improving healthcare, demands on social care will also rise at a greater rate. Improved social care will mitigate some of the effects of poor healthcare or being in poor health, the two not necessarily being synonymous, of course. So poor health at any age, but particularly in the elderly, is a major cause of isolation, depression, and a poor quality of life. So this is a much more holistic approach to trying to improve the quality of our lives for those ages over 65. So the question is often asked, why those over 65? Well, in Croydon, we spend around £1,087 per average person in Croydon. At 65, that's £4,000 per annum, and at 75, that's £7,000 per annum. So this is an attempt, rather artificially, to pick at a level where long-term conditions become more common to help and have the maximum benefit possible going forward. We would expect that having an outcome-based commissioning contract starting at age 65 would significantly concentrate the healthcare system to look at preventative disease so that those reaching 65 have a lower requirement for healthcare going forward. So this would, we believe, significantly boost the efforts in health prevention, the other joint agendas we have around obesity, keeping healthy and keeping well, and about self-management of conditions. So it's not just about health, it's not just about social care, it's about the whole wellness agenda, and we look forward to working over the next period to resolve the current issues we have and to make significant improvements for the people's health in Croydon. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Paula, and thank all of your teams who have been involved with our officials. This is a huge collaborative exercise. I think we all know, was it Sam in the video? We all know somebody like that, and I know there's some very good care homes out there, but whenever I speak to somebody like Sam, they'd actually far rather stay at home and have their treatment there than they would go elsewhere. So I think on every level, including the long-term financial implications, this is something that is the right thing to be doing. I also want to thank, from the previous administration, Councillor Margaret Mead, because she started some of this work with officers as well, and that's important to acknowledge, because this is not just a 5 or 10 year plan. This is a generational change in how healthcare is provided. Did I see? Yes. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. This really is groundbreaking work here in the paper, and I very much welcome the initiative. I know that Councillor Mead has worked extremely hard with everyone here, Tony and Paula and Brent. I see Brenda there. She really put her efforts into this. And I think we all know we have an ageing population. We have to work in a very different way. I live in a ward in Sanderstead where people live forever now. I was just talking to a lady today who was born in 1918, and that isn't uncommon in my area. So this work is extremely important. We want to see people having independence, good well-being and good health and good outcomes for the residents. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to you, Louisa, about this, but I wondered what you thought the most important outcomes were, the most important radical changes were, in your opinion. If you could tell me, say, 3 important radical changes that you felt were important in this paper. And, of course, we're going to have to monitor this extremely importantly to see how those changes are coming through. I'd just like your view on those 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring Louisa in a minute. There's so many hands up. I'll take a number of questions to get Louisa to come back in and respond to them. I've seen Sarah, then Councillor Andrew Stranick, then Councillor Speakman, but I've also seen another hand here. Okay, Maddie. Anyone else? Okay, we'll do those. So, Councillor Sarah Bashford.
Thank you. I very much hope that all the individual questions will actually be answered, because often when we have this round robin of questions, many get left out. Mine refers to 8.10, and I'd like to ask Councillor Woodley, can she tell me how she feels about Croydon's position in relation to people receiving pension credit against the London and English average? And secondly, whether this has an impact on the paper and what she's outlined today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Interesting question. Councillor Stranick.
Hello. I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member, we have a voluntary sector community neighbourhood network, the CNCA, that I think we can all be proud of in the borough. I just wanted to ask how they are involved with the whole programme and to ensure that they're an equal partner, not a minority partner in the project going forward.
Okay, what we'll do, we'll take those 3 down, if you like, and welcome to the Cabinet. I think it's the first one we've seen you at, so welcome.
Yes, just to the first question as regards to 3 important changes. I think as you've noticed in the film, in the little video, what we would like to see is that there isn't a piecemeal provision, that there's that joined up provision, so that there'd be better outcomes. So Sam, for example, had someone called Kathy who could draw all the pieces of the jigsaw together, put all the pieces of the jigsaw together to ensure that he had a better life and he didn't wait around on trolleys in hospitals when the system could be joined up to deliver better outcomes for him. And I think those are the changes that I would like to see for people over 65, and obviously it will trickle down, we hope, to people who are under 65. Like 65 is the age at which it will start. But I think the important change would be looking at the person in the whole and making sure that we that we are incentivized, rather than saying, I'm in that little box and I produce, and I deliver this, making sure that we have what we call a provider alliance of providers that ensure that we are very much centred and focused on the person. As regards to challenges, in the paper we outline governance and accountability, and really the big challenge is where we are now at phase 3, to actually make sure we get the governance accountability right, to make sure we get the scope, timing and phasing right. Those are absolutely pivotal. It's absolutely important that we get those right. The voluntary sector, yes, we do see the voluntary sector as very much, and I think Dr. Projiski referred to joining up, not just it's the council, the CCG, and very much the voluntary sector joining, working in cooperation to make sure that we provide the best services for the residents of Croydon.
Thank you. Yeah, just on the monitoring side, obviously this is going to be a huge and complex contract. One of the major pieces, from my perspective, from my portfolio area, not the finance but the commissioning and looking at performance, is to make sure that we've got the right system of checks and balances, so that even though obviously it's a CCG that will be providing about 80% of the funding, so that it has 80% of the spend in this area, that there is a proper check and balance with the council who, you know, very much, if this isn't got right, picks up the tab in terms of social care needs and so on, and also fully integrating with that voluntary sector, both in terms of what they deliver, but also through things like Health Watch, feedback of what is working and what isn't. So it will need its own framework, and I personally, subject to all the negotiations in the next phase, would lead to see that council-driven in terms of our wider responsibility for residents, not just their health, but their wider well-being and that duty. So that's what we'll be working on in the next stage, and it's getting that right is one of the absolute critical factors to make sure that this works for the people of Croydon as well as the council.
Thank you very much. Councillor, sorry.
My question wasn't answered.
What was your question, Sarah?
Pension credit.
Pension credits. Anyone on pension credits? Richard.
Councillor Newman, my question actually was directed to the Cabinet members specifically rather than an officer.
Could you give us a bit more detail then if you want to talk about the pension credits?
In 8.10, page 81, it's obviously important because it's mentioned in the paper. So my question to Councillor Woodley is, how does she feel about the Croydon position, which is referred to here, and how she believes this impacts on the information that she's provided?
Do you want to take that now? We'll come back to it. Okay, I'll take some more questions and we'll come back to that one. Councillor Donald Speakman was next up.
Thank you, Leader. And I welcome the report. Social service is not a contentious department, and we are indebted to the social workers and the care workers that are engaged. One primary question affecting the elderly is that they want continuity of the visitor. They want whoever comes to look after them to be the same person for as long as possible. And that depends upon management systems that are established. So my question is, will the Cabinet member assure herself that there is a management structure in place, that officers know who actually is visiting who and how long that those social workers are visiting that person? I don't mean time in a daily time or visit time, I mean continuity over a period of time. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can all probably agree with that, but I'll bring the Cabinet member in again in a minute. Councillor Maddie Henson.
Yes, I very much welcome this paper, and I just wanted to highlight the vital importance of it. I think a few people here know that unfortunately I lost my grandmother to motor neurone disease, better known by as ALS, the latter part of last year. She was ill with it for about a year, and she was very reliant on the services provided in Croydon. But a large problem was that she was forced to spend well over 50% of the time in hospital, because that was the only place where they could coordinate all the care she needed. So it can make a real difference to people's lives, this paper.
Thank you, Maddie, and I think that's real-life example in terms of how important this work is. Councillor Stephen Mann.
Thank you, Leader. I also really welcome this paper. So from my experience working in care, it's for a brief period, it's a very low-paid industry, long hours, but for the most part, these people do an absolutely cracking job out there. As part of this paper and alongside it, I know we're looking towards the living wage for contractors, and will this living wage be linked in with this contract? And also, will there be upskilling for the staff on hand to make sure that we can deliver the best possible care for people like Sam out there? Cheers.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Anyone else? Okay, on this question, Councillor Tony Litz.
A very quick one. It's with regards to the pension credit. I think one of the issues that we have a lower uptake than elsewhere in London, in Croydon, is that older people are loath to give information, are loath to say what their finances are, and have difficulty in applying it. And I know from people who come to my surgery, and Timothy, my colleague, when people have come to our surgery over benefits, sometimes it's very difficult to get them to apply for such. So I think one of the roles in all of this caring is caring about their finances and how much money they're entitled to and how they can get that money, what support's given them in filling in forms. A lot of it's done online today. A lot of our older people do not have technology at home. So I just think that perhaps a little more needs to go into this paper about benefits and, perhaps they don't call it disability living allowance anymore, but whatever the new term is. I do think that we need to go on looking at that and endeavouring to try and get people to claim what's theirs by right, and it isn't charity.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think we do need to look even closer at how we make online services, which so many are, available to those parts of the population that don't still use them. Louisa, a number of questions.
Yes, so what we have to do is make sure that we have all those services joined up when we're looking at what services we need to deliver to older people, and it also indicates that we have the lower take-up on. Indicates that we have a large percentage of our older people living on low income, and obviously this affects the people in a certain demographic, I should say, of people find it difficult to cope with claiming things, and sometimes are, as you said, reluctant to be deemed. They see it as reflecting on themselves badly if they're claiming for certain things, and the whole point of moving forward in an integrated delivering outcomes for the person will ensure that, say, going back to Sam's case, if that person should have been claiming pension credit, then he or she, Sarah, will have a Kathy that could actually say, look, you should be claiming that pension credit, and this is the way that your service, we could have your joined up service delivered. The management structure, I said that it's important at this phase that we get the governance right, and it is critical in moving forward that we get the governance, a method of monitoring, the accountability, that we do get it right with our partners, because it's absolutely important before we move forward.
Thank you very much. This really is about putting people over 65. It's about dignity. I think it's about controlling old age, and it's about empowerment of people. And it is a huge project in terms of the undertaking and the size of the population of Croydon. But I think that it's clear from our colleagues here tonight and others, the voluntary sector as well, that there's a lot of will to make this work. We will be bringing a further paper back. Clearly, this is the next step on what I think is a very exciting journey, and hopefully to a different care system in this borough and then beyond. Can we agree the paper? Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Moving on to agenda item 11 and the contracts to be awarded. It's largely here for noting. Is there any questions? Sarah?
Thank you. I've got quite a number of questions on this paper. I'd first like to say it's a great shame that the Corporate Services Committee was dropped, because that actually gave this paper and the papers like this a huge amount of transparency and openness, where elected members could ask very detailed questions and we had a lot more information. So the questions that I have, and again, if they could all be answered, would be lovely, are on page 133. 3 of the papers are variations, and I'd be grateful to know what those variations consist of. Contract 2, the windows, is an extension to the contract. Again, can we know why this didn't go back to market? On the second page of the paper, 134, you talk about the clock tower and town hall WC refurbishment works. Can you just please let us know why you believe this was a priority, as you've made comments about taps and other things in the past? And in addition, my last question is the final one about orders for the framework contract. Is it possible to give an estimated value of the expected works under that contract? Thank you.
Just briefly, in terms of why it's here, we thought it was very important in terms of transparency that the key contracts for this council were actually at the cabinet meeting, because that's the most important place for them to be. So, and they've been clearly, as ever, available online for the week beforehand. And I should reiterate, I don't know if it's going to be a new shadow cabinet or not, but clearly we made it clear as an administration, and officers have obviously responded positively, that all members of the shadow cabinet, whenever you need a briefing on anything, do use the facilities of the senior officers of the council, and they'll be available to provide a briefing before this meeting or any other meeting if you wish the detail. Simon, can I pass over to you?
Yeah. Right. In terms of the variations and extension, what they all are means to ensure that all the different contracts on planned maintenance come to an end on the 31st of March 2016, so that the strategic procurement, which is the other paper and where there's a detailed appendix on tonight's paper about reprocuring planned maintenance as a whole in a coordinated way, you can obviously only do that if all the current contracts terminate at the same date, because otherwise you get into total chaos and different starts, and you're not going to drive through the efficiencies for residents of Croydon. So that's the logic for all of those ones. I know one's described as extension, the other variations, but they're actually all extensions, and that's also detailed actually in the other appendix, that's what we're doing. So in terms of the clock tower and town hall works, basically, we were advised that there were works that were safety critical because of length of time, and it's not just toilets, obviously, it's lots of other works that have been done, clock tower and town hall, works that needed to be done to provide the right services, for various things, including toilets, and it's all been grouped under that refurbishment work, where there were quite a lot of parts of the buildings that were more than tired. And as part of turning this into the People's Town Hall, we wanted an environment that was both safe but also pleasant to visit, and that's why a number of upgrades have been done to provide improved facilities, improved signage for all those that come here.
Thank you very much, Simon. Councillor Tony Litz?
Yes, I'm going to be very, very brief. I don't usually drag the Chief Executive into the ladies' loo, but I did earlier in the summer, because I have to say, I'm shocked, Sarah, that you think that's an awful lot of money and it's not a priority to do up the loos, because quite frankly, they stunk. They were dirty, they were horrid. And if we're bringing members of the public into this building, and businesses and investors and others, I do not want to take them to a filthy loo.
Which comes back to what we were saying at the start of the meeting about pride in the borough, really. Councillor Timothy Godfrey.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to exactly echo that. I mean, anyone who uses the clock tower regularly would know how neglected and horrible it's actually ended up from its former glory when it was opened in 1994. And so, you know, these toilets were a complete and utter disgrace to this borough. And so it's a fantastic piece of work being done, and it will actually enable all the users of the clock tower to relieve themselves in a place that doesn't stink to high heaven.
Actually, coming back to, because many older people used to say to me what are about those facilities there. So thank both of you for the work you have done in helping turn the clock tower round. Okay, we've got to agree as a cabinet the appendix to item 11, which is the plan, maintenance, the improvement, procurement strategy and transition strategy. Can we agree that paper, please? Thank you very much. Why not? It's been your night, Michael, I feel.
Why not? Okay, and obviously in terms of openness and transparency, in 1.3 the paper, can you explain the necessity to have delegated authority for procurement 2, 3 and 4? Naturally, obviously, you make the decisions, but don't you think, in terms of openness, that it should be brought back to Cabinet for approval if you are having more than one contractor? If the officers proceed and recommend that you should only have one contractor, will you honour that pledge, even though the savings may not be as great as you thought? And quickly, the second one, can I be ensured that under the social value you will give serious consideration to at least having 15 to 20% of Croydon-based subcontractors using local employers and apprenticeships?
Well, I think you can, but that's very much. I welcome your, this sort of transformation tonight in terms of support for commitments in Labour's manifesto, because that's very much what we've said we'll do. And I'm happy to trust our cabinet member will bring it back to the cabinet if we see that that's significant in terms of the transparency. But the fact that we have these papers at cabinet, I think, is the statement in terms of transparency. I think that's the webcast stopped. We're in part B. No, it hasn't. It hasn't. Excellent. Still at part A. So look, in terms of the transparency, it will be back here if there is a significant need to do that. And in terms of the local workforce, it was this administration that put in at the heart of our manifesto that we expected to see opportunities in terms of local companies and local people being able to both have an opportunity to bid for contracts if they're running a company or be employed by this council or anyone else if they're resident in the borough. So you have my complete assurance on that one, and look forward to working with you on that. With that, can I ask that we agree the paper? Thank you very much. There is no part B tonight because it is a transparent council, so we try and keep everything in the public domain. So there will be no other papers taken anywhere tonight. So can I thank the many thousands of people watching and say good night.